In recent years, the wet weather tire has been the mockery of the sport. They have been labeled the red flag tire or the safety car tire that is pretty much useless. But 2026 might actually be bringing a way back for these tires, and today I'll show you why. And first of all, I think we should try to understand first why racing in the rain has become so difficult in recent years compared to a few decades ago. And whenever this discussion comes up online, I feel like I always see people that are arguing that the FIA overprotects the drivers, and even worse, that the drivers themselves don't really want to race in those conditions, that they aren't brave enough, and that they should do it because they are paid very well, and that's a risk inherent to the job. But I have to disagree with most of this, because although I feel like sometimes the FIA does overprotect the drivers, and well, they sometimes make very incomprehensible decisions, the drivers themselves are very brave and they would race if they could. But the problem is that nowadays it's very difficult to race in those conditions. If you've seen a Formula 1 race in the wet conditions recently, you know what I'm talking about. You see the huge sprays coming out of the cars into the cars behind them, and it's basically a wall of water composed by dozens or even hundreds of liters of water that are flung up into the sky, creating that dense mist that basically kills the vision and makes the races undrivable for every driver except the one in first place, because he doesn't have anyone to spray him with water. Such conditions were not the norm a few decades or even years back. So the real question we should be asking here is, why has racing in the rain become so much harder nowadays? And starting by the most obvious of reasons, we have the tires, because I believe that every Formula 1 fan that have watched a wet race in recent years has heard this stat in every broadcast, that the inters clear up to 35 liters of water per second and the wets clear up to 85 liters of water per second. A huge amount of water that, well, it basically doesn't vanish. When it's cleared by the tires, it's flung up into the air and right into the car behind. And this problem became even worse after 2017, because that year the FIA decided to make the tires bigger or larger, and the rear tires, for example, went from 325 millimeters of width to 405 millimeters. And that makes sense when you look at a dry perspective, because the cars have been gaining a lot of downforce throughout the years, and especially in this last decade or so, a lot of downforce has been added to the cars. So larger tires provide more grip, provide more stability, and make a lot of sense for dry races. But of course the trade-off is that there is a bigger area for the threads of the wet weather tires to clear water, and therefore they fling up a lot more water than before. The more downforce a car has, the more water it will kick up when driving around the track, and therefore making it harder for everyone else to see what's in front of them. And inside this category of wet weather tires, the inters are the most well behaved, because they displace a considerably less amount of water than the wet weather tires. They are basically the ones that everyone uses when they have the chance to, but they are of course limited by the amount of water that they can displace, because if there is too much sitting water and they can't clear it up with the inters, it becomes a problem, aquaplaning begins to happen, and that's a killer for everyone. So the inters work very well, but they have to be used in very specific conditions, namely in low to moderate rain or in changeover conditions. The full wets suffer from their own success, because they are designed to clear huge amounts of sitting water on the track, and that's exactly what they do, but by doing so they create a lot of spray, and that kills the vision for everybody else. Although, to be fair to these tires, they are not really the problem here. The cars nowadays kick up a lot of water, and that makes the second reason that I'm introducing here why racing in the rain has become so difficult, especially after 2022. And if you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel down below. I've been producing a lot of content in this off season, some of it you might like, so be very welcome to watch any of it. Throughout the years, Formula 1 cars have evolved a lot in terms of downforce. I've mentioned it here today. And one of the main parts of the cars that produces the downforce that they use is the diffuser. In this part of the car, the air is accelerated under the floor, creating a low pressure zone that sucks the floor to the ground. And by doing so, if there's water in the way, it's also sucked and then brutally expelled by the diffuser in a spray of water that goes directly into the car behind. And if this was a problem before 2022, after it became a huge one, because now the floor and the diffuser are the main producers of downforce, and basically what they do is that they suck up a lot more water than before and they then fling it onto the other cars. It's in the name of the era, the ground effects era, and this became one of the main problems for racing in the rain. But this era brought along a second problem that is hidden in the first one. And this is one that was supposed to be a solution, because if you remember back to 2021 and the years before that, these new regulations had one big purpose that they ultimately failed. It was to produce better racing and to allow the cars to race each other closer. And to do so, one of the things that they implemented was to send the air out of the diffuser into the sky instead of directly into the car behind. And you don't have to be a genius to guess what happens when you have water mixed with the air. Instead of it being flung directly into the car behind, it is going upwards and therefore creates a huge wall of water, because not only the floor displaces a lot more water than before, it flings it up, basically creating a massive, huge wall of water that basically you can't see through and kills the visibility for everybody else. So once again, if you're not in first, you don't want to be in any other position, because the spray is so dense that it becomes very dangerous to race around the track. To sum it all up in just a few words, Formula 1 cars nowadays have become really big fog machines, and if you have 20 of them at the start of a race flinging up water into the sky, it's basically a fog fest going into turn 1, and no one knows what they're doing, and they're relying on their instincts and on the very little information that they can get to react in time, not to crash into everybody else. As for the wet weather tires, they are great at what they do, but unfortunately for them they require a condition of racing that is no longer really raceable. Their purpose is mainly to do a qualifying session maybe, or to go around the track behind the safety car, waiting for better conditions for the drivers to change to the inters and then restart the race. So I hope it becomes clearer why nowadays is so much tougher to race in the rain than before, when we had smaller, lighter cars that were more agile, and that basically make this one more reason why smaller cars with less downforce produce much better racing. But I do believe some hope is on the horizon though, at least for racing in the rain, because the 2026 cars are not going to rely as much on ground effects. So basically the problem with the floor sucking up water and flinging it up won't be as huge as it was before. And also the active aero might help with the problem of the spray, because one of the sections of the track where most spray is produced is on the straights, because the cars are going a lot quicker, they are producing a lot of downforce, and therefore they kick up a lot more water. Also, the cars are, at least for now, going to be quite slower than they are today. They are going to be expectedly 5 seconds per lap slower than they were before, and this is a lot of less downforce being produced, and this might also help with raceability in the rain. The spray has been such a big problem that the FIA was prompted to carry out some tests with some kind of mud guards that they tested with McLaren, Mercedes and Ferrari in 2023 and 2024. but the results were unfortunately very underwhelming. And that's probably because the tires are not the main issue anymore. The ground effect era is kicking up so much water with their floors and diffusers that the problem has become much huger than that. And hopefully for 2026, the new generation of cars will help with that, and maybe they can carry out some new tests with these mudguards, and perhaps they'll get some more interesting results than what they did with this generation of cars. But for now, all we can do is wait these 2 and a bit months that we have until the first race of the season, and hopefully it will magically solve all our problems. I always like to believe this, I'm always very optimistic, and I can't wait to see the first cars out on track. But until that time comes, don't forget to leave your like in the video and subscribe to the channel down below to keep up with the new releases, and I'll see you next week for the next video.